Good morning. Welcome to Hometown Heroes. This is Rick Irving with my host, Mary Staffeld. And today we have Susan Irvin with us, and she's going to tell us some incredible stories about growing up and traveling the world with her parents. So, Susan, we look forward to those stories. And Mary, Roll Call has had some of our veterans recognized at the Ranger game just recently, haven't they?
We have. We've had quite a time this year. So last year, Lockheed Martin, working with the Rangers, recognized 3 of our World War II veterans. This year, we've been able to recognize some World War II and some Korea War veterans. So Jim Sharp right here is one of our Korean War veterans. And as you can see, Purple Heart recipient, just a mountain of a man. We love to hear Jim's stories. You know, he really contributed greatly to getting those guys into some cold weather gear because they were absolutely freezing to death out there. And Jim's one heck of a guy. We also have taken Larry Kynard, another Korea War veteran, and he got to experience the crowd yelling for him and everything, and just, you know, it's only one veteran that's recognized at a time, and Lockheed does such a fabulous job. And you can see these are a bunch of the Lockheed employees. They have a banner behind them, and they have people sign that banner all throughout the night while they're coming in, and then they present that to them or to us. And we've already had a couple of them, so we have them up in the hall while we're doing the luncheon. So Larry is going to take this one and have it displayed when they do their Korea War group meetings. So that's going to be that one. And Jack Stowe, you guys are going to get the pleasure of hearing from Jack here in a couple of weeks on the show. Jack is one of our World War II veterans. He's about to turn 98 years old. The Navy still thinks he's about to turn 100 because he joined when he was 15 and lied about his age. So he's an interesting guy, and we were able to have him honored. And also Mel Sumrall. So when Rick advances the picture here, we'll get to see Mel. And Mel is a very proud Marine, as you can see, and as most Marines, is surrounded, of course, by the Rangers dance team, cheerleader. I'm not really sure what they're called, but there's Mel, and he's just a really great guy as well, World War II. So it's really a neat partnership that we have with Lockheed as one of our sponsors. They sponsor us every year. They contribute the cost of one of our luncheons.
And they've been good to us, haven't they?
Incredibly good to us. We go out and we actually have a table usually out at their military expo they do for their employees. But this particular night, it's only one veteran that's recognized in the whole entire stadium. And so this is not a group thing where they have a whole bunch of them. This is one. And so it's a really special honor for those guys, and we are incredibly appreciative for Lockheed's contribution to having us do that. And we'll have one more recognized in September for this year, and then, you know, we'll move on. But really has been a really special honor. And since I have to, in case we run over, because we do sometimes, in case I'm not here, I do have an appointment that I'll have to get to. So if I drop off for anybody listening, our speaker, we're having a speaker change. So we'll announce that for our August luncheon. So we are going to be changing our speaker for the August luncheon.
And the reservations open pretty soon?
Yeah, RSVP link will open on the 12th. And we did that intentionally because we are in our temporary location. We are going to have a few less people there for the lunch. And because of that, and in the number of people that if they register early, then they cancel because now they've made doctor's appointments that happen to fall on that Friday. This will help us maybe not have so many cancellations and having to get people into those spots. But it will be the 23rd, the luncheon, and the RSVP link will open on the 12th. So if you want
good.
Yeah, I would say the 12th, 13th, 14th, next week, Monday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'm going to guarantee you they'll be full. Yeah.
That's good to have people wanting to go. So
Yeah,
Our,
it's crazy. It's really crazy.
it is. Our guest today is Susan Howell Irvin, and we've been friends for a while. It's kind of a deal that happened. She became advisor for the Fort Worth Air Power Council, and I was got an email from the Fort Worth Air Power Council, and I saw my wife's name on it. But then I looked a little closer, and it was Susan Irvin and not Susan Irving with a G. So sometimes, I mean, you had a health issue one time, and one of our board members said, "How's your wife?" And I said, "She's doing fine." And he looked at me kind of funny, and I thought, "Oh, I know you're thinking about Susan Irvin." But years ago, our sons played Little League at the West Side Little League, so uh, I've kind of known of you a long time, worked closely with you with the Fort Worth Air Power Council and Holidays and Heroes. So uh,
Right.
you have real strong roots in Fort Worth, and your dad was a World War II B-24 pilot flying out of Italy, and there's just some incredible stories about how he survived the war. And then after the war, he went back to school, got a degree, and you can tell us the things that have happened for him to become a world-renowned inventor and a businessman. So, Susan, welcome to Hometown Heroes.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come and tell my stories. My children go, "Mother, you're a storyteller," and that I am. Um, as far as my father was concerned, what was so incredible about him was he was a genius, but he had a very strong ability for just plain old good common sense. So a lot of times you'll meet a genius and they kind of live in their own little world. But he was very grounded, very very strong, principled man, and he taught me to love our country in such a way that a lot of people don't understand. When uh, I was 3 years old, we had Daddy had been in the war. He had been shot down, taken in by the Russians, and then after the war, he returned home, and he and my mother. He went up to school at the University of Michigan, graduated valedictorian, and one day he came home. My mother was from Cleveland, and he came home and she was lying across the bed, and he said, "Barbara, what's wrong?" And she's crying her eyes out, and he said, "Did somebody die?" And she said, "No." And he said, "Did I forget to take out the trash?" "No," and he goes through this long list. Finally, he said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "I want to see the sun." And he looked outside and he realized it had either been snowing, raining, or overcast for 100 days straight. So he knew he had to get his Texas gal back to Texas and to the good old sunshine. So at that time, it was Convair, and he got a job here. And one day, while he was working, they were trying to get the B-36 contract through the Pentagon, and they had set up the aircraft ready to demonstrate it, and they had all the big wigs out on the line and everything, and they had engine trouble. So they called engineering and they said, "Send somebody down, get these engines going." And so they sent my father down, and he was sitting there, and he loved his toothpicks, and he would take his toothpick, and he always thought out his problems before he acted. And so everyone was coming up and going, "John, I think," and he'd go, "No, no, no, just leave me alone, let me think." And he thought it through, and then he got a wrench and a ladder, and he climbed up and he adjusted the fuel flow in each engine. And then he got down and motioned to the pilot to turn the engines on. And sure enough, they all fired up and everything was good. And so he went back up to engineering and he sat down and drew out this instrument. And he said, he then took the drawing to his supervisor and he said, if you'll build this, you won't have any trouble with the engines flaming out or, you know, any problems with them. And he said, John, we don't make the instruments. We get all of the instruments together and then we install them in the aircraft. If you'll build this, we'll buy it from you. So he went to my mother's father and they talked to my grandfather, and he said, John, I'll loan you the money if you will get a good lawyer and a CPA. So Daddy hired a gentleman by the name of George Q. McGowan, and I swear they did the cartoon character of Mr. Magoo off of George Q. He looked just like Mr. Magoo and had the Panama hat and the glasses, and he always mumbled and everything, but he was brilliant and a wonderful lawyer. And so anyway, he finally quit Convair, and he opened up his own shop and he hired all the employees and they got the contract. No money came in, and they were sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting, and he was just paying these guys to sit out and play football on the parking lot, and while they were waiting on the contract to come through. And finally, one day, it had gotten down to the point where he could not even afford to renew the license plate on the car. So he had to go down to Houston to talk with some people down there. And he drove all of the back roads to get down there so he wouldn't be stopped by the police. And so while he was down there, he thought, well, I'll go back and stop on the way back home at Randolph Air Force Base and see what the holdup is on this contract. So what he did was he goes into appropriations and he said, would like to know what the problem is. And they said, oh, Mr. Howell, we're so glad you're here. If you will sign here, we will deliver your money. And George Q had told Daddy that if he did not get his money up front, the government would take so long to pay him that he'd go broke. So anyway, he signs the for the money, and the people come out and they start they put up a card table, and then they come out and start stacking all these $100 bills on this card table. And Daddy looks at him and goes, what is this? And they said, well, it's your money. And he said, well, couldn't you write me a check or something? I mean, all of this cash? And they said, Mr. Howell, it says COD, cash on demand. You demanded it. We have delivered it. And he said, well, can you help me get it out to my car? And they said, I'm sorry, but we can't touch it. And he goes, you can't touch it? What are you talking about? He said, we have fulfilled the contract. We have delivered the money to you. It's all right there. And he was afraid that if he started shuffling money back and forth to the car, that someone would steal it. So he looks at him and he said, well, can I take one of these $100 bills and I'll be back in a little bit? Could you guard my money? And they said, we'll be more than happy to guard it. We just can't touch it. And he said, Mr. Howell, this is your money. You can take however much you want. So he took $100 bills. Now, this is back in 1951. So that was a lot of money. And So he takes a $100 bill and he said, "Where's the nearest hardware store?" And they told him. He comes back with a wheelbarrow, a tarp, and a rope, and he loads it all up into the wheelbarrow, and then he takes it back out to his car and he unloads it into the trunk of the car and ties the wheelbarrow to the top of the roof of the car. And then he drives like a bat out of hell on all of the back roads because he still hasn't got a new license plate. So he's dodging all of the police on the back roads, and he finally gets home. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and he pulls into the driveway and he's honking the horn. And Mother finally comes out and he goes, "Barbara, Barbara, open up the garage door, but don't turn on the light," you know. So she opens up the garage door and they unload all of the money, and she gives him a blanket and a pillow, and he sleeps on top of it that night. And then the next morning he loads it back up into his car, ties the wheelbarrow onto the top, goes to the bank, and he said, "You should have seen the look on the teller's face when I come in dollars that he had made." And the instrument that he developed changed the world. It made jet travel safe. It's called a hot section analyzer, and I don't want to get too technical for you, but there are hot sections within the jet engine. And during World War II, Hitler had invented the jet engine, but only two of his test pilots, survived flight. And so you can imagine how they felt when they say next. and so anyway, they had a problem with the hot sections firing up evenly and the wear and tear on the engine, and they had no idea, when the engine was going to be stressed out. And this made it so that the pilot could read his instrument, is called the EGT gauge, on the instrument panel, which was the exhaust gas temperature gauge, and it tells the pilot, what the performance of his engine is. And if you saw Top Gun, the very first one, and Goose and Maverick go into that flat spin, and you hear this whoop, whoop, whoop sound. That is our instrument telling the pilot, "You're in a boatload of trouble. You need to either change your angle of attack or, pull back on the engine, but you're in trouble." And so it revolutionized flight. It allowed
Because
them.
the jet engine was just coming into development and use, so you had the military and civilian aircraft using it. So he had customers around the world that had to have his product.
We worked very closely with all of our allies, and during that time frame, in the very beginning, I literally watched the world go from the mechanical age to the jet age. When I was 9 years old, he took my mother and my sister and I over to Europe. And when we left New York, we were on a clipper ship, which was a converted World War II bomber. And there were only 42 passengers, and the overhead bins were sleepers, kind of like what you would have on a train, where the beds they turned into beds, and we could sleep because it took us 18 hours to get from New York to London, and so we slept a good portion of the way over, and so anyway, when we were in in London. Just a real quick little side story. Our representative, sales representative was named Jack Bryan, and he had a wife named Anne. And Anne had been decorated by, at that time, Queen Elizabeth. She then became the Queen Mother, but during World War II, she was the Queen. And she had knighted Anne for her service in the fact that she headed up all of the Red Cross during World War II. And they actually named a hospital after Dame Anne. And so anyway, one day she arranged for Mother and Marion and I, my sister and I, to have tea with the Queen Mother at the Royal Lodge in Windsor. And Mother made me dress to the nines. I had to wear all my petticoats and the hat and gloves and black patent shoes and all of that. And she grilled me on being a young lady. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden this woman walks in, and everybody stands up. And then Mother said, Susan, you have to curtsy. And I said, why? And Mother said, because that's the Queen. And I looked at her and I said, no, she's not. And everybody stopped, and they turned and looked at me like this. And someone finally said, why not? And I said, because she's not wearing her crown. So to a 9-year-old, you weren't a queen unless you wore your crown every day. And Queen Elizabeth thought that was the funniest thing. And she said, oh, honey, it is way too heavy to wear every single day. And so I don't have to wear it all the time.
But it was not uncommon for you and your family to travel around the world on the business trips that your dad went on. Uh-oh.
Hello. Okay, are we back?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't uncommon at all for you and your family to travel on business trips with your dad in different parts of the world.
I traveled all over the world with them. And what was so incredible is that on that trip, we went back 4 months later. We boarded an aircraft at Heathrow. After Daddy had gone over, he took Mother, Marion, and I. He bought a car in Frankfurt, and then he drove us 36,000 miles around Europe. So then we go back to London, and when we board the aircraft in London, we boarded a WWII Comet, and when we boarded that aircraft, when we did, going back to the U.S., there was a WWII Comet that was taking off in New York, and we crossed the Atlantic, mid-Atlantic, and it was the very first transatlantic commercial jet flight. So I literally that summer saw us go from the mechanical age to the jet age, and then the world took off. It was just phenomenal how when you shortened the flight time to get around the world, it revolutionized mankind. So I really attribute the change in the world to my father's invention, and it then became there wasn't as much wear and tear on the commercial engines. So we really became very specialized in working with the military. And so what happened was we were privileged to deal with our allies worldwide. And so in later years, I ended up, Daddy sent me to school in Switzerland. So I spent my high school years in Switzerland. And what happened is that because he was, whenever he would go off the continent of the United States, he would call me and say, "Meet me." And so I would get on a plane, and leave school and get on a plane, and then I would go and meet him. And so one time he said, "Meet me in London." So I got into London, and I had just gotten into my room and was getting ready to unpack, and he came in and he said, "Nope, don't unpack. I just got a call. We've got to go to Paris." And they sent a car to pick us up, and they had a plane, and they flew us into this secured airport outside of Paris. It had, the 20-foot fence with the razor wire and all of that around the hangars and the landing strip. And so, anyway, we go into the hangar. There's this beautiful aircraft, and when they allowed us to go up into the interior of it. And when I did, the whole inside of the aircraft was wiring. There was nothing, no chairs or anything like that. All there was a wiring and a metal plate that went down the length of the aircraft, and then the pilot and co-pilot seat were bolted into the flooring. And so obviously I had an opportunity, so I climbed into the pilot's seat, and Daddy goes back down to talk to the engineers, and I hear this, "Don't turn the engines on," as I'm playing with the ailerons and all of that. And I'm stick my thumb out the window. I'm like, "Yep, you're right. I won't. I won't touch anything." So anyway, as I was walking out, I finally climbed out of the pilot seat and walking down the steps, and he came out of the office and he went over to the drafting table with the engineers, and he said, "Well, we can get the instruments that you need here in about 6 weeks. If you need it any sooner than that, it's going to triple the cost because we've got to move so many things off of the assembly line to get them there." And they said, "Mr. Howell, we thought it was going to take 6 months. We'll take the 6 weeks." So 6 weeks later, Daddy calls me and he said, "Meet me in Paris." So I go to Paris, and I go into we go out to the hangar, and he supervises the installation of all of the instruments that they needed. And then the next day, we went back out to the hangar, and they pulled the plane out of the hangar and turned on the engines. Nothing blew up. We were real excited about that. And then we watched it taxi down the runway, and then it took off, and it was the maiden flight of the Concorde. So I literally went from the propeller to the jet age to the supersonic age within about 10 years. And well, less than that. And so it couldn't have happened without his instrumentation. But if you look at when they say the Concorde made its maiden flight, there's no way they would have put all of those executives on that aircraft for the first time without having tested it out. So I really and truly did see it do its maiden flight, and it was an incredible experience.
One time,
but yeah.
One time you went to Cairo with him, and
yes, yeah.
all of a sudden some things happened on the world stage, and had to get out of Cairo.
We were in Cairo. We had just landed, actually, and it took us an hour and a half because the traffic was so bad to get into the hotel after having landed. And so we were in the suite, and all of a sudden we got a knock on the door, and the manager said, "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pack your bags and leave. We have just broken out in war with Israel." And we were like, "You got to be kidding." And so we literally stepped out on the balcony, and what had been nose to nose traffic. There wasn't anything on the streets except tanks going down the main road. And we were just stunned because we had only been in the hotel just a couple of hours maybe. So it literally took us 72 hours to get out of Cairo. And when we finally got out, the war was almost over. It was the beginning of the 6-day war. So it was really
It was a quick one.
It was a quick one, but it really changed the dynamics in the Middle East, and it really we traveled throughout the Middle East, even though there was tension between Israel and the Arabs. The State Department issued Daddy and I separate passports so that we could, because we were still allies with the Arabs. So we did business with like the Shah of Iran and all, but we couldn't go into Iran with having a stamp of having been to Israel. So the State Department issued us 2 different passports so that we could travel back and forth to the 2 different areas in the Middle East. And we could only, we'd have to sit there and look at our passports and go, okay, I got the red dot, I can go here, and so it was interesting because Daddy would call me, and one time he called me and he said, meet me in Rome. And so I met him in Rome. And then we flew to Tehran. We had lunch with the Shah of Iran, and the Shah gave him 6 kilos of fresh Iranian caviar. So we literally got on the plane, and he said, this is my last stop on this trip. And so he kept getting the flight attendants to put his fresh caviar in the refrigerator because there's no preservatives in it. So it's wonderful, wonderful caviar. It's fabulous caviar. And which is literally it's about 15 pounds of caviar. So we ate a lot of caviar. But we just had experience. I had wonderful experiences with him. One time he called me and he said, meet me in Bangkok. And I said, Daddy, it's going to take me 2 days to get to Bangkok. He said, well, it's going to take me the same thing. Lucy's got a ticket for you at the airport. Get on a plane. So we went to Bangkok, and years and years and years later, I wrote a book, and my publicist said, well, do you have any pictures? And I said, yes. And so I had a picture of this helicopter, and I'm standing out in front of the helicopter, and there's a little face sitting out the window. And so Paul, I would put it in the used pile, and then he'd take it out, and then I'd pick it up and I'd put it back in the used pile. And he said, what is so special about this picture? And I said, well, that's the King of Thailand's helicopter, and that is the future King of Thailand. And he flew Daddy and I around Bangkok so we could see what his helicopter did. And we put instruments on his helicopter. And he went, okay, we'll use that picture. So, as I said, I've seen the world from a totally different geopolitical way. And I think the greatest thing that I was given through all of the travels that we went on was the love I have for America. I love this country. I have seen intimately the lives of others in third world countries, in advanced countries. I mean, I've just seen them seen it all, and nothing compares to the principles and the abilities that that have grown up from what our founding fathers created in the beginning of this country to what it is today, so that we are the safe haven for freedom. And it allows people to have a choice, and we really have to safeguard that. I really, really am very adamant about that, and I talk about it to my children and grandchildren all the
Yeah,
time.
and it doesn't just, it safeguards our freedom, but it also gives people, just like your dad, John, the ability to start with an idea, start with a product, and build it in your garage, and then have an international company like Howell Instruments is today. And you
Right.
can't do that in other countries like that.
No, you can't. I mean, there's no, um, but the thing that Daddy did was, because we spent so much time together, he was a great proponent in studying the free enterprise system, free economics, what our founding fathers utilized and how they built this country. And he taught me a lot. He really did. And we talked about it all the time. And he, we would, as we would go to different countries and learn how, because we were dealing with the top guys, but then we were on the line with the average soldier, with the average man, um, uh, worldwide. And so I got to see the world in a totally different way than most people get to see it, because I saw it from the very top to the low echelon, and I really began to appreciate the ingenuity of mankind. I
And you
really
got to
did.
see, you also got to see our country from the very bottom of the social economic ladder all the way up to the top. And then even with the presidents and stuff. But even in our city, with your dad starting a little business, becoming very, uh,
Success.
financially
Right.
successful, you got to see a lot of the founders and the people that have really made Fort Worth a great place. You became friends with them.
Oh, well, I went to school with 90% of their kids, growing up. And so, um, I would sit and listen to Charles Tandy talk, and Tex Moncrief, and uh, Charlie Rowan, some of these wonderful, wonderful men that made Texas great. I mean, we knew the Murchisons and the Hunts and in Dallas, and so again, I was given a very privileged and interesting opportunity to see how influential those men were to the world as well. And it's amazing what all our little bitty community, Fort Worth, how it has affected the world. I mean, Charlie Rowan, it is a well-kept secret. He was a wildcatter way back in the 20s. And what was so incredible about Charlie was that the Russians came to him and they said, "We got a serious problem." And they said, "We had a revolution, and we killed all of the original."
I think you froze up again, Susan. If
Yeah,
you can
I
start
don't.
with the revolution. You,
The they said, well, we've had a revolution, and we killed all of the aristocrats, but what we didn't realize was they were the thinking man. They knew how to do everything. And we're running out of oil, and our country is coming to a dead stop. We don't have enough oil to even run the trains or transportation or anything. So, but we know we've got a whole bunch, and we've got a field called the Siberian Desert, and we know there's a lot of oil out there. Could you drill for us? And Charlie said, sure, fine. And they said, we have another minor problem. And he said, what was that? I said, we don't have any money either.
Oh,
And
no.
so, but we just killed our czars and czarina, and we have all of their stuff. Would you like to go shopping? And so they literally opened up the vaults, and Charlie goes in and comes home with Fabergé eggs, icons, paintings, artwork. He even came home with the wedding crowns of Nicholas and Alexandra. And then when they began to make money, then they paid him and blah, 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 blah. So Charlie was a real well hidden secret. And he had two children. One was named Arch and the other one was Martha. And Arch, I loved Arch dearly. He was one of the dearest, sweetest men, funny as all get out, but great personality. Was barbecuing in his backyard. And back in the day, they used to start the barbecue with a liquid fire starter. And it caught on fire, went back up the stream, and the can exploded and killed him.
Mm.
And so it only left Martha as the recipient and heir to her father's fortune. But she turned that into great good and ended up being founding the Van Cliburn Foundation. And so Martha Hyder was Charlie Rowan's daughter. So a lot of history. I've grown up with a lot of history in Fort Worth, not just my own, but knowing these wonderful people and their stories and how they fought and did great things. And so Charlie's one of my unspoken heroes, and very few know about him.
One of our listeners, Thomas Holder, said the Russian Revolution drilling story is really interesting. And, there's probably a lot of us that could sit at your feet and listen to a lot of stories like that. But
I wrote a book called Oil Rush. And it, even though it's not the full story, my life story, I took incidences out of my life and applied it to the story. It became a story back in 1960, 61. The contract for the British to have a presence in the Middle East was in Bahrain, and their contract was running out. And so it became a battle as to who was going to take over that base in Manama, Bahrain, and it was either the U.S. or Russia. And so I took about 3 or 4 oilmen stories and compacted them into an old geezer, and he got his granddaughter in a mill of a Hess, and it became a tug of war between the U.S. needing a presence, the Russians needing a presence, the CIA, the KGB, and 2 sisters, and it's how we got a presence in the Middle East. It's not a true story, but a lot of the story.
I think we lost her again for a second.
it's based on real situations, real facts.
And
So,
they can find that at Amazon. It's on Amazon,
or
and
you can go to susanhowell.com and buy the
okay.
book there. You can get the hardback on my website. So,
And I've got that hardback, and I'm in the process of reading it. It's very interesting, so I can attest that it's a good book.
well, good. I had a general call me at like 7 o'clock one Saturday morning, and he said, "Are you up?" And I said, "Well, I am now." I said, "What are you doing calling me this early in the morning?" And he said, "Well, I couldn't sleep, so I picked up the book. I just had to finish it at 4 o'clock this morning, and I have been sitting here waiting for you to wake up." And so we went into great discussion about what was real and what wasn't, and how I put the story together, and it ended up being a really fun story. It's an international spy intrigue is what it really turned out to be. But it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to write.
And tell us about that flag behind you.
Well, this flag is an interesting flag. She's been in my closet for 21 years. My cousin was a flight attendant for American Airlines, and she had enough seniority that on March 17th, 2003, this was after 9/11, they finally were capable of launching an offensive into Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11. And so she was on the second flight carrying our troops into Kuwait City before they marched into war. While she was on that flight, she and her other flight attendants decorated the aircraft with banners and flags and all of that stuff. But she took this particular flag and passed it around, and she had the recruits sign it for them, and then they ended up marching into war, facing the enemy on March 20th. So 3 days later, these young men who were new recruits, had just come out of sniper school, and they wrote wonderful things on this flag. Some of them were really compelling. One of them said, "May my stars, I'm doing this so my stars, stripes, and eagle will fly forever." And another one said, "I'm proud to be an American, whatever the cost. Know I'm there." And another one said, "For the love and safety of my wife and family." Another one said, "Always faithful." It said, "For the pride and honor of my country and the love of my family, Semper Fi." He said, "Not every man can fight. We do what we must for our country. I am proud to have the opportunity for freedom and the American way of life." So these sayings are all over this flag, and they picked up that flag of valor and marched into war. And Sarah came home with the flag, and a month later, I sent my son into war. And so we ended up on a talk show, and she had the flag, and then I told my story about my son going. And afterwards, I was a basket case. I was just bawling all over the place. And so she rolled it up, stuck it in a tube, and handed it to me and said, "You deserve to have this." And so she gave it to me, and I put it in my closet for 21 years. And I became very good friends with a gentleman named Don Graves. He's a wonderful, wonderful veteran. He's one of the last living heroes of Iwo Jima. And we started going to lunch and dinner and so on and so forth, and sharing our stories back and forth. And he just turned 99. But anyway, one day I took him to lunch, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to show him this flag. So I stuck it in the back of my car, and I told him, I said, Don, I've got something I want to show you. So I pulled it out and I unfurled the flag. And when I did, he was so cute and so sweet. He turned around and he said, Susan, this well, the waiter was, the flag's so big, as you can see, it was so big that the waiter had to help me hold it out. And then when the waiter started reading all of the names on the flag, he started crying. And he comes over and he puts his head on my shoulder, and I'm like, don't let the flag touch the ground. I don't want to burn it. Be real careful with it. And so anyway, Don starts banging on the table, and he said, this flag belongs out at the Marine base in San Diego. And I said, no, it doesn't. This flag belongs to America. This flag, the minute they signed that flag, it became the Flag of Valor for every single person. They represent every single person that has ever stood a post and said, nothing will harm you tonight. We are standing in the gap for freedom. And he sat there and looked at me, and he almost started pouting. And so I took the flag over to Scott Murray, and Scott and I sat in his living room for about 2 hours, looking at it and reading and trying to decide what to do. And so we have decided, he said, Susan, you got to find the young men that have signed these, and let's get their story. And then we'll build a QR code. And then when they press on that QR code, then we can have the guys' stories come up. They can each one tell their story and how this affected their lives and what happened with it. And I said, okay. And he said, but we've got to get it archived. And so Don and I were at dinner one night, and I still had the flag in the back of the car, and a gentleman, I got ready to pay, and the lady said, well, someone is taking care of that. And so I found the man that had taken care of our deal. And I said, would you like to come over and meet Don? And he had his 14-year-old son. So I went out to the car and I dug out the flag, and I told him what our vision was. And he said, my company, Salmons Industries, will pay for you to have that archived. And so there it is. It's in its glory, and it's been archived. And so I'm so thrilled with what has happened with it. And I had a friend of mine that has written a song, and it's about freedom, and it's just such a wonderful song. I'm trying to get him to let me play this all the time, but you can hear a little bit of it in the background of what this song and the flag go together. And one day I'd like to reunite the signees with my cousin. I'd love to be able to bring them all together and let them meet. And I did happen to find one of the signees, and he was so cute. It was really funny. He said that I want to find that what I wrote to him. The gentleman was so good about coming forth and saying what he had, how much this flag meant to him, and that what it had done. And but he told me, I told him what I wanted to do was to be able to take this flag, take it out into the American community, and show our children valor, show our children what these brave people are willing to do to stand up so that they can go to school, they can learn the history of this country, they can learn the truth of who they are, they can learn skills and be able to raise their families in a safe environment where they can make the right choices. And so when I found this one man, his name is Ian Perry, and I've come to the point where I just love this kid. I want to adopt him. He's so cute. But anyway, he told me, he said, I haven't done anything special. And I wrote him back and I said, let me explain something to you. I know that you think you did not do anything special, but I have to contradict you and say, yes, you did. You were willing to do what was necessary to protect this wonderful country of ours and the freedoms that many have shed their blood for. And you did it without hesitation or expectation of reward, other than to know that your loved ones slept well that night, because you had the courage to stand as a shield for us who could not fight. That is extraordinary and should be recognized. I want to help you to be recognized. You and every other person who has stood up and fought for the freedom of choice that America offers to all who dwell within her shores. This flag is not just about you. It is representing those who came together in order to form a more perfect union under one nation. It is representing those whose blood was shed for the idea of a free nation where mankind could exist to the fullness of freedom. Your flag of valor represents more than just you men who have signed this flag. You signed this flag representing the many who have come before you, those that took an idea and died for it, those who loved the freedom of this country allows us to have and have stood beside the fellow soldier and said, let freedom reign. So what you signed, so when you signed that flag, you became one of those men. You are special indeed, and I intend to tell the world about how special you young men are. And that's what I want to do. And roll call has played such a huge part in this. They have allowed me to run everything through there. And what we would like to do is take the flag, let roll call put it on their website or any other site that has something to do with the military or firefighters, policemen, whatever. And they can use that as a form of fundraising, and they get to keep the funds that they raise. So if roll call puts this on their website and people pay and raise money with it, then roll call gets to keep it. All I ask is a small amount of money so that we can build a website and keep it up so that others may benefit from it. So
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, Rick, and I know Susan and I have had these conversations. What we'd like to do is ultimately have this flag have it be its own website, and people be able to reach out and ask for the flag to come to them. So,
Right.
and for right now, until we can get the infrastructure built for Susan to be separated from us, if somebody would like to have this flag come to their business, to their organization, their civic group, their school, we ask that they reach out to us at the info@roll-call.org box and let us know, and, give us an idea of a date and a time, what they'd like for us to do. And obviously, if they're able to do a contribution toward the flag project, that would be great, because that, that helps Susan get this thing really out there and in the public. So, and I know that Rick will put this out and it'll go out to a lot of different media streams. If somebody out there is listening and says, I really think that my school children or my civic group would benefit by being able to, have the flag in our facility and hear more about the flag, please contact us. And that's ultimately what we'd like to do, is help Susan really make this a project that can stand on its own feet and do what it is she wants it to do. And that's to educate folks about the importance of patriotism and how important it is that we protect and save what our founders built for us, which, we don't want to lose.
That's right.
And I have to tell you, we are losing that because we are not teaching our children the history that they need to know. I took my grandchildren up to the up in the East, and I wanted them to know their American heritage. So I took them to Boston, Lexington and Concord, down to New York and Philadelphia and Old Williamsburg, Washington, D.C., and just to give them that heritage that they needed. What was amazing to me is when we went to Philadelphia. Here you are at the seat of where our freedoms were birthed. And they had what they call the Freedom Center, and we're in the middle. They have a stage play so that before you go into Independence Hall, you'll know what you're going in for. And I was sitting in the audience, and this woman comes out on stage, and she's dressed as a slave with a pickaninny bandana and all of this stuff, and starts talking about that the Revolutionary War was fought over slavery. And I turned around and I go, "That's a lie." And I mean, I shouted it out, and my daughter slapped her hand over my mouth, and I pulled her hand down. And I said, "That's a freaking lie." It was fought over taxation without representation. I mean, get your facts straight, lady. And then I turned around and I said, and the very first slaves in America were not Black, they were white. So don't even go there and play this slave card on us. You don't even know what you're talking about. Do not bastardize our history. And the woman literally walked off the stage. She couldn't finish because every time she opened her mouth, it was a lie. And I called her out on it. And so we get into the Liberty Bell, and all of a sudden the Liberty Bell is for the freedom of the slaves. And I'm going, it had nothing to do with the freedom of the slaves.
Yeah.
And so we get into Independence Hall, and the man gives a 3-minute speech, and he's through. So I get my girls, and they're standing around me, and I looked at them and I said, "Do you see those curtains over there?" And they went, "Yeah." So those are real important curtains. And I said, they were like, "Why?" I said, you stop and think about it. They had to cover those windows so that no one knew what they were doing. And they stayed in there. They fought and they thought over every single word that went into that Declaration of Independence. They struggled with everything that they were doing, and they prayed about it on a constant basis, so that they knew that they were creating a new country, and they had huge responsibility. And I said, they didn't take that lightly, and that it took them months and months and months to come up with that declaration. And it was hot, it was sweaty, and it was dangerous. If anybody knew what they were doing, they were going to get killed. And so I turn around and look, 30 people are standing behind us, and they're patting me on the back and going, "Whoa, lady, we need to hear more and more and more," you know. But we went through, we got all the way down to Old Williamsburg, and the girls looked at me and they said, "This is the most incredible trip. We will never, ever forget about it." And they talk about it to this day because they truly do know their American heritage and what our young people are now fighting for. And the sad part about it is a lot of the military do not have a clue because they have not been taught our American heritage. So,
So Susan's the flag project is about bringing folks back to a spirit of patriotism. So again, if that is something that you're interested in, please let us know, and we can connect you with Susan, and hopefully we can continue to help folks understand history and the impact of each of these folks. And Susan, you're, I always enjoy hearing your stories because you've got so many great ones. And I know Rick feels the same. And we sure do appreciate you being here today to share those stories with us.
well, it's been a tremendous privilege. I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to even tap into and bore you with some of my stories. But I really do appreciate it because I love you guys. I love what you stand for, and I want to support you in any way that I can. I'm so sorry that I couldn't pick up a gun and stand a post, but I can't hit the broadside of a barn. So,
but thank you for the support that you give our military and our veterans. You work with so many organizations and support so many groups, not just in Fort Worth, but around the world.
right.
And we just appreciate you.
And I'm a military mom. I've sent my son off to war 9 times. He's still serving over in South Korea. So, yeah, I know exactly what you and your families go through, and I appreciate it. I really and truly appreciate it. And Mary, I just want to say a big shout out as to all that you have done for our country and standing in harm's way, and what you are continuing to do to support our military. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Susan, our time's up for today, but thank you so much for being a guest on Hometown Heroes. And we look forward to hearing more stories from you. So
I've got them.
You've got a million of them.
You'll hear him. There you go. Get that book.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I do appreciate
and we'll
it.
see you soon, probably next Tuesday at the Fort Worth Air Power Council meeting.
I will. I'm planning on being there. So, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Some incredible stories, Mary.
Yep, absolutely. She's
incredible stories.
Been around the world a time or two.
Yeah, and it's baseball season. You've been to the game Friday night. I went with some of the people from Freedom Mobility with the Potts family. They were there, and then we kind of double dipped that night. And I had some of the Gold Star parents from Gold Star Parents Retreat. So that was a great evening of baseball. I'll be out there tomorrow with the Purple Heart recipients. They're going to be recognized. I'm going to take pictures for them. Yesterday, I had an incredible opportunity to go to a pinning for a Command Sergeant Major, Gretchen Evans, and she was the first woman to lead troops into combat. And she was receiving a second Purple Heart. Somehow they missed one, and so years later, they had a pinning, and it was just a very nice afternoon with a lot of great Americans. So it's a great world we live in to be able to witness things like that. Coming up October 13th is our clay shoot for a roll call. There's still time to certainly sponsor and still time to get your teams lined up for that. So a lot of things happening. And just remember that it's Overlord Adventures. And this is one of our roll call members. And if you book a trip through him to return to the D-Day beaches, he'll donate $250 back to roll call. And you can see the QR code there to get more information. So, that's a great way to support roll call and to support our veterans.
Yep. And learn a little more history.
That's right. A lot more history.
That's right.
Well, thank everybody so much for being part of this Hometown Heroes. And we just enjoyed having Susan on here. And she's got some incredible stories. She's had experiences that other people never would imagine to have, traveling around the world and being involved, watching the world from a whole different perspective. So we look forward to having more stories from her. And roll call is the 23rd. Reservation lines will be open next week for RSVPs. And we look forward to having a great roll call meeting. Mary, thank you so much for being here and co-hosting Hometown Heroes.